Hello, Internet. My name is Salma, and this is the first ever Fabula Rasa video, which is really exciting, and I'm really just elated that this project is finally getting off its feet. So, what I'm going to do here today is I'm going to draw my life and draw my experiences to tell you about my story. So, let's start from the very beginning. I was born in Germany, and I moved to Egypt with my family when I was about 2, and we moved here to Miami from Egypt when I was about 4. One of the biggest difficulties that we had in the move from Egypt to the USA was sort of this awkward tension that existed between the people that lived here and my family. We're a Muslim family, and my mom wears the hijab, which shows our religion very outwardly. And we also moved here about a year after 9/11, and there was still this tension between the Muslim American community and the rest of the American population. So my family kind of dealt with this tension the second that we moved here. But I was only 4, so in my eyes, what was really happening was me noticing these differences between my family and other families here and associating it with this awkwardness. I would tell myself that it was because they celebrated Christmas and we didn't, or that they ate gummy worms and we didn't. And I mean, it sounds very funny now, but I was genuinely concerned that it was because of these differences that this awkwardness existed. When I was 6, however, my parents explained that because the tension existed because of what happened during 9/11. And we watched this video, and the first thing that they said was Muslim terrorists attacked the World Trade Center, and I realized that the tension existed because of what had happened in 2001, that people assumed that we were like the terrorists because of the fact that we practiced the same religion. But that definitely was not the case. Because my mom wore the hijab, angry looks were like everywhere, and they began appearing more and more often, and it was really distressing. I would ask my mom, "Mom, why is he looking at us so weirdly?" And she wouldn't know how to respond. And that year, I started school, and luckily, school was kind of this escape from all the mean things that happened to my family. I went to school every day with this feeling of acceptance, and it was just awesome, and I made a lot of friends, and it was really cool. I really loved school. But when Christmas time rolled around, the feeling of acceptance kind of was threatened because our school was so decorative and out there about Christmas. I would never feel the joy of waking up to presents under the Christmas tree or anything like that, and it was just so common at my school, so it was weird for me, but I did really appreciate the 2 weeks that we have off, and I still do. But when my religious holiday, Eid al-Fitr, came around, I had to skip school to go to the mosque, it was all right, but I really did miss school. I had a lot of fun with my family and friends at the mosque during Eid, but missing school really sucked because I would have to catch up later on. So now we fast forward to middle school, the place where everyone gets at least 200 times cooler than they were before. Middle school was weird because the first thing that I noticed was that the different environment that existed. In elementary school, everyone disregarded the differences to an extent, but in middle school, it sort of became this place where the only thing that people noticed were the differences. I became known as that Muslim girl, and it was very isolating. People didn't know my real name sometimes, and to most, I was just that Muslim girl. I would be in a really good mood, and someone would come up to me and make crass remarks like, "Hey, you're that terrorist. Is Osama bin Laden your dad?" And at this time, I genuinely didn't understand the concept of terrorism. I knew that it was bad, but it hadn't really been defined by anyone to me yet. So I went home that day and I asked my dad, "Hey, Baba, what's a terrorist?" And he replied, "A very, very bad person who kills people who disagree with what that person believes." And I was in shock, like I couldn't comprehend how I, a 12-year-old girl, could possibly be killing anyone. And I knew that it was because I was Muslim that I was being called a terrorist, but it still hurt a lot. And these names kind of sort of began jumbling up in my head, and they clouded my whole thought process. And I would see someone in the hall and be afraid that they were going to start calling me a terrorist, or that they were going to ask me if Osama bin Laden was my dad, and my mind would go back to the definition of terrorism, and then it would become even worse. And on top of that, I'd get really weird looks, and it was all too much. And I began developing social anxiety, where I'd be afraid to speak to people because I was afraid that I'd get called these horrible things. And whenever I went to the counselor's office or I told my teachers about what was happening, they'd tell me to ignore it, but that was a lot harder than they thought, and I began living in this pool of just horribleness, and it was such a horrible time, and I felt isolated and friendless and just horrible about myself. And one day, two people approached me and asked me if I was okay, and because of that, we became friends. And we became really, really good friends, and we were sitting in lunch one day after a couple of months of being good friends, and the conversation steered towards why we were friends with each other. A couple of my friends said, "'Cause you're awesome," and I responded the same way, but when it came to one of my friends, he paused and said, "So you don't bomb me?" And he laughed, and I know now that it was a joke, but at that time I was devastated. Like, how could I have trusted someone so much and they had just dumped me they just throw me under the bus like that? Like, I had been avoiding bullies for so long, and then all of a sudden one was my friend, one was someone who I trusted completely, and things went back to the way they were before. Things were horrible, and I really began hating middle school. Luckily, though, middle school only lasts 3 years, so a year later I was already off to a new school, and I thought everything would be awesome. But in the summer between 8th and ninth grade, something just didn't feel right. So what I decided to do was to look within myself as to what was wrong, and I decided that it would be a good idea to wear the hijab. I was feeling great and more devoted to my faith, but the hijab made me more vulnerable, and the whole world knew that I was Muslim, and I felt that as though everyone was staring constantly, even strangers in supermarkets or on the bus. But after a while, I got used to it, and I grew from it. If someone called me a terrorist, I would explain to them that Islam is actually an extremely peaceful religion, and for that reason, I wear this hijab with pride and devotion to my religion. Because of my experiences with being bullied and with being ostracized, I decided to devote myself to the reduction of ignorance surrounding minority groups in America, which is really why Fabula Rasa exists. My vision for the future is this world where diversity is accepted and cherished, and that people within minority groups will shine with pride and will work towards the reduction of ignorance within their own groups. And the fact that you're all here today watching this first video is a great step towards creating this world where ignorance regarding diversity is completely non-existent. So now here's where your input comes into play. In order for this project to be successful, we need as many subscriptions as possible. And if you want to be notified about when the next video comes out, hit subscribe. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. And if you have any input whatsoever, comment below. Thanks, guys!